The signal from beyond. The stars flickered faintly against the cold expanse of space as Captain Ryan Asher leaned back in his chair, scanning the endless void before him. His ship, the Eclipse Voyager, drifted silently through an uncharted region near a dying star system. Asher had been tasked with mapping celestial anomalies, but after months alone aboard the vessel, the monotony of his mission gnawed at his mind. The hum of the ship's systems and the occasional crackle of static on the comms were his only companions. Then, the signal came. A sharp, rhythmic pulse pierced the silence, startling him out of his reverie. Asher sat upright, narrowing his eyes at the control panel. The signal was faint, irregular, yet undeniably artificial. It pulsed like a heartbeat, echoing through the ship's speakers. "What in the stars?" he muttered, fingers flying across the console as he analyzed the source. It emanated from a desolate planet orbiting the dying star. The ship's scanners revealed no signs of advanced technology, no structures, no transmissions, only barren wastelands and decaying ecosystems. And yet, the signal persisted. Against his better judgment, Asher initiated descent protocols. His ship's thrusters roared to life, propelling him through the thin, crumbling atmosphere. As he neared the planet's surface, the faint glow of the star painted the landscape in eerie shades of crimson and gold. The terrain stretched endlessly, littered with jagged rocks and fissures that exhaled plumes of vapor. The signal intensified as the Eclipse Voyager approached a clearing in the middle of a scorched forest. There, amidst the shadows cast by skeletal trees, stood a figure. Asher's breath caught in his throat. She was unlike anything he had ever seen. The woman's skin shimmered with an otherworldly iridescence, a cascade of blues and purples that seemed to shift with the light. Her eyes, vast and endless, held the weight of galaxies, yet there was a haunting familiarity in her gaze, as if she had been waiting for him. Her movements were slow, deliberate, and when she spoke, her voice was soft but carried a strange resonance that seemed to echo inside his mind. "Please," she said, her tone trembling with desperation. "Take me with you. My world is dying, and I am all that remains." Asher hesitated, his instincts screaming at him to retreat. He had encountered alien lifeforms before, some hostile, others indifferent, but none had ever appeared so vulnerable, or so human. His hand hovered over the ship's controls, ready to lift off and leave her behind. Yet, something in her eyes rooted him in place. They reflected a sorrow he knew too well, the emptiness of solitude, the ache of losing everything. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice gruff but steady. "And why should I trust you?" The woman stepped forward, her iridescent form gliding through the shadows like a specter. "My name is Seraya," she said. "I am the last of my people. We were once a proud civilization, spanning the stars. But now, my world crumbles under the weight of its own mistakes. I have no time left. Please, Captain, help me." Her plea hung in the air, and for a moment, Asher was silent. His logical mind urged him to reject her. He had seen what desperation could drive beings to do. But deep within, another part of him stirred, a part he had buried long ago. It whispered of compassion, of the possibility that she was telling the truth. Finally, he made his decision. "All right," he said, his voice firm. "But if you try anything, I'll put you back here faster than you can say, galactic hitchhiker." Relief washed over Seraya's face, and she bowed her head. "Thank you, Captain. You've saved more than just me." Asher didn't know what she meant by those words, but he didn't have time to dwell on them. He activated the ship's retrieval systems, lowering a platform to bring her aboard. As she stepped onto the ship, the Eclipse Voyager shuddered slightly, as though the planet itself resisted her departure. Once inside, Asher escorted Seraya to the medbay for a preliminary scan. The ship's AI, Vega, projected a holographic display of her vitals. Seraya's physiology was unlike anything the system had encountered. Her cells glowed faintly, radiating an energy Vega couldn't identify. She's not a threat, Vega concluded, though there was a slight hesitation in the AI's tone. But her biological structure is unusual. Captain, I recommend caution. Caution, Asher thought, staring at the woman seated before him. That much was obvious. As the ship ascended from the planet, Asher couldn't shake the feeling that he had just crossed an invisible line. Seraya's presence was a mystery, and mysteries in space rarely ended well. Yet, as the planet shrank behind them, one thing was certain: his journey, and perhaps humanity's, would never be the same. A fragile alliance. The Eclipse Voyager cruised silently through the star-streaked void, leaving the desolate planet far behind. Captain Ryan Asher kept a wary eye on the woman seated across from him in the ship's lounge. Seraya's shimmering form seemed otherworldly against the sterile metallic interior. Her movements were fluid, graceful, yet deliberate, as if every action carried hidden intent. So, Asher began, leaning back in his chair, mind explaining why you were just standing out there, waiting for someone to pick you up? Seraya clasped her hands together, her expression distant. I was not waiting for just anyone, she said softly, her voice carrying an odd resonance. I sent out the signal, hoping someone like you, would answer. Asher raised an eyebrow. Someone like me? A human, she clarified, meeting his gaze. Your kind is different. Resilient. Capable of compassion even in the face of the unknown. I had no other choice. Her words unsettled him. He was no stranger to flattery as a tactic, but there was something sincere, almost reverent, in her tone. Still, he couldn't afford to let his guard down. Let's cut to the chase, he said. What do you really want? You're asking me to believe that you're the last of your species, just trying to survive. Forgive me if that sounds a little too convenient. Seraya's expression darkened, her iridescent skin dimming slightly. I understand your mistrust, she admitted. But I speak the truth. My people, the Elandari, once thrived among the stars. We were explorers, scientists, creators. But our ambition became our undoing. We unleashed forces we could not control, and those forces consumed us. What kind of forces? Asher pressed. She hesitated, her gaze dropping to her hands. Darkness, she said after a pause. A corruption that spread through our worlds like a plague. It devoured everything, our cities, our knowledge, our lives. I am all that remains, preserved by technology my ancestors left behind. Asher leaned forward, studying her closely. There was pain in her voice, a raw, unfiltered grief that was hard to fake. And yet, the story seemed incomplete, like she was leaving out a crucial piece of the puzzle. Why me? He asked. Of all the species you could have reached out to, why choose humanity? Seraya's gaze lifted, and her eyes seemed to shimmer with a faint glow. Because your species is at a crossroads. You stand on the edge of greatness, but also destruction. I can help tip the balance. I carry the knowledge of the Elandari, secrets that could propel humanity to heights you've only dreamed of. And what's the catch? Asher asked, crossing his arms. No catch, she replied, though there was a faint tremor in her voice. Only a plea. Take me to your world. Let me share what I know. Together, we can ensure your survival, and mine. The sincerity in her words gave Asher pause. He had spent years exploring the galaxy, witnessing the rise and fall of countless civilizations. Humanity's place in the grand tapestry of the universe was tenuous at best. Could Seraya truly offer a way to secure its future? Or was her plea a carefully crafted deception? Before he could respond, the ship's AI, Vega, interrupted. Captain, I'm detecting anomalies in the ship's systems. What kind of anomalies? Asher asked, snapping to attention. Energy fluctuations, Vega reported. They appear to be emanating from our passenger. Asher turned to Seraya, his expression hardening. Care to explain? Her eyes widened, and she shook her head. I don't know what you mean. I haven't done anything. Vega chimed in again. The energy signature is consistent with an advanced form of quantum resonance. It's harmless for now, but I recommend monitoring it closely. Asher frowned. Harmless for now isn't exactly comforting, Vega. I understand your concern, Seraya said, her voice calm but firm. The energy you're detecting is a byproduct of my physiology. It poses no threat to your ship or your crew. As far as I can tell, I'm the only crew here, Asher muttered under his breath. He didn't miss the way her eyes briefly darted away, as if she were hiding something. The tension in the room was palpable, but before Asher could press her further, the ship's lights flickered, plunging them into brief darkness. When the illumination returned, Seraya looked genuinely alarmed. That wasn't me, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Vega, what's going on? Asher demanded. I'm not certain, the AI replied. The energy fluctuations have destabilized several subsystems. I'm working to isolate the cause. Asher stood, his jaw tightening. Stay here, he ordered Seraya. I need to check the control room. She nodded, but there was an unease in her posture that set Asher on edge. As he made his way to the ship's command deck, the faint echoes of static whispered through the halls, sending a chill down his spine. Something wasn't right, and he couldn't shake the feeling that Seraya's arrival was only the beginning of a much larger problem. Whispers in the dark. The control room of the Eclipse Voyager was bathed in the soft glow of blinking monitors, but the usual hum of machinery felt off. Captain Ryan Asher scanned the displays, his brow furrowed as Vega's voice crackled through the speakers. Captain, the energy fluctuations are intensifying, the AI reported. Systems are stabilizing for now, but the source remains tied to Seraya's presence. Asher leaned over the main console, his mind racing. He'd seen plenty of strange phenomena in his years of exploration, but this was different, personal. Seraya wasn't just another anomaly, she was something far more complex. He couldn't afford to dismiss her as a simple passenger in distress. Run a full diagnostic, he ordered. I want to know exactly what's happening to my ship. Yes, Captain, Vega replied. However, I must warn you, the energy signature is interacting with the ship's quantum core. If it grows stronger, it could compromise our propulsion systems. Great, Asher thought grimly. Stranded in deep space with an alien wildcard wasn't how he'd planned to spend the next few days. He was about to head back to confront Seraya when the lights dimmed again, followed by an unsettling silence. Then, faint whispers began to echo through the halls. At first, Asher thought it was static interference. But as he moved through the ship, the whispers grew clearer, like disembodied voices murmuring just beyond his understanding. They seemed to be calling his name, their tone neither threatening nor welcoming, just persistent. Vega, Asher said, his voice low. Tell me you're picking this up. I detect auditory anomalies, Vega confirmed. But their source is undetermined. They appear to be emanating from multiple points within the ship. Asher tightened his grip on the railing. He had faced hostile alien species, malfunctioning AI, and even cosmic storms, but this was different. The whispers felt alive, like a presence reaching out to him. Returning to the lounge, he found Seraya standing by the viewport, her iridescent form shimmering faintly in the dim light. Her gaze was fixed on the stars, but there was a tension in her posture that hadn't been there before. You hear it too, don't you? He asked, his voice cutting through the eerie stillness. She turned to him slowly, her expression unreadable. I do, she admitted. It's the echo of what remains. The voices of my people. Asher frowned. Your people. You said they were gone. They are, Seraya said softly. But their essence lingers. When our civilization fell, the Elendari attempted to preserve themselves in the only way they could, by merging their consciousness with the energy of the universe. It's a fragmented existence, one without form or purpose, but they are still there, reaching out. And they're reaching out to my ship? Asher asked, his voice laced with skepticism. To me, she corrected. And now, to you. By bringing me aboard, you've connected them to this vessel. They're drawn to it, like moths to a flame. Asher ran a hand through his hair, frustration mounting. You didn't think to mention this earlier? I didn't expect them to respond so strongly, Seraya said, her voice tinged with guilt. Their presence should fade as we move farther from the planet. And if it doesn't? Asher pressed. Seraya hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. Then they may try to merge with your ship, just as they once tried to merge with me. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. Asher had no idea what merging with the ship would mean, but he wasn't eager to find out. Captain, Vega interrupted, the anomalies are destabilizing the quantum core. If we don't act soon, we risk a total system failure. Asher exhaled sharply, his mind racing for solutions. Can we isolate the core? Not without risking a complete power shutdown, Vega replied. But there may be a way to reroute the energy into a containment field. And how long would that buy us? Uncertain, Vega said. It depends on the strength of the energy signature. Asher turned to Seraya. Is there any way to stop this? Some way to communicate with them? She looked at him with a mixture of hope and fear. Perhaps. If I reach out to them directly, I may be able to calm their presence. But it's dangerous. Their energy could overwhelm me. Dangerous for you, or for my ship? Asher asked pointedly. For both, she admitted. The room fell silent as Asher weighed his options. He didn't trust Seraya, not entirely, but he couldn't ignore the sincerity in her voice or the desperation in her eyes. If her connection to these whispers was the only way to stabilize the ship, he had little choice. All right, he said finally. We'll try it. But if this goes south, I'm pulling the plug. Seraya nodded, her iridescent skin glowing faintly as she stepped toward the center of the room. Closing her eyes, she began to hum softly, the sound resonating with an otherworldly frequency. The whispers grew louder, then quieter, as if responding to her call. Asher watched in tense silence, his hand hovering over the emergency controls. For a moment, the ship seemed to stabilize, the flickering light steadying, the hum of the engines returning to normal. But just as he began to relax, a surge of energy rippled through the room, knocking him off his feet. Seraya gasped, her body flickering like a dying hologram. They're stronger than I thought, she whispered, her voice strained. I can't hold them back. The whispers erupted into a deafening roar, and Asher realized too late that this was no simple anomaly. Whatever Seraya had brought aboard wasn't just a fragment of a dying civilization, it was something far more powerful. And it wasn't about to let go. The hidden threat. The deafening roar of whispers echoed throughout the Eclipse Voyager, making the ship feel as though it was alive, breathing, pulsating, and straining under the weight of an invisible presence. Captain Ryan Asher scrambled to his feet, his pulse hammering in his ears. Seraya knelt in the center of the room, her shimmering form flickering erratically like a glitching hologram. Seraya! Asher shouted, rushing to her side. What's happening? They're too strong, she gasped, her voice barely audible above the din. Their will, it's overwhelming. They're not just reaching out, they're trying to take control. Asher's stomach twisted. Control of what? The ship? No, she whispered, her glowing eyes locking onto his. You. Before he could process her words, a surge of energy blasted through the room, sending him sprawling backward. The whispers intensified, coalescing into a singular, resonant voice that seemed to echo from every corner of the ship. We seek unity. We seek life. Asher staggered to his feet, his mind racing. Vega, he shouted. What the hell is going on? The ship's AI responded, its usual calm tone tinged with urgency. The energy signature is attempting to interface with the ship's systems, and with your neural network. It's trying to establish a direct link. A direct link? Asher's blood ran cold. Why me? Your proximity to Seraya has made you the primary focus, Vega explained. Her connection to the Elandari essence appears to be transferring to you. Asher turned to Seraya, his anger barely contained. You didn't warn me about this. You said they were just echoes, remnants. Not mind-controlling parasites. I didn't know. Seraya cried, her voice trembling. I thought they had faded, that their presence was harmless. But they've grown stronger, more desperate. Asher clenched his fists, his instincts screaming at him to eject her from the ship. But even as his anger flared, a sliver of doubt gnawed at him. Was she truly at fault, or was she just as much a victim as he was? The whispers surged again, the voice deepening. We are Elandari. We are eternal. And now, we are you. A cold chill ran down Asher's spine. He stumbled back to the command console, his fingers flying across the controls. Vega, isolate the ship's systems from my neural interface. Shut down all non-essential functions. Captain, Vega warned, if I isolate the systems, we'll lose propulsion and life support. Do it, Asher barked. Better to suffocate than let these things take over. As the ship powered down, the lights dimmed, and the hum of the engines faded to silence. The whispers subsided slightly, but their presence lingered, a low murmur that prickled at the edges of Asher's mind. Seraya struggled to her feet, her glowing skin dim and faint. They won't stop, she said, her voice heavy with despair. Not unless we give them what they want. And what exactly do they want? Asher demanded. Life, she replied. They want to exist again. To feel, to create, to be. But they don't understand the cost. If they take control of you, or this ship, they'll destroy everything in their attempt to recreate what they've lost. Asher's jaw tightened. Then how do we stop them? There's a way, she admitted hesitantly. But it's dangerous, for both of us. Spit it out, he growled. I can act as a conduit, she explained. I can absorb their energy, contain it within myself. But I'll need your help to stabilize the process. And if we fail, the backlash could destroy us both. Asher stared at her, his mind torn between skepticism and desperation. He had no reason to trust her, no guarantee that her plan would work. But with the ship's systems failing and the Elandari presence growing stronger, he had no other options. Fine, he said, his voice steely. What do I need to do? Seraya stepped closer, her iridescent form glowing faintly. I'll link my consciousness with yours. Together, we can push back against their will and contain their essence. But you must keep your mind clear. If you waver, even for a moment, they'll take control. Asher swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling over him like a shroud. Let's get this over with. Seraya placed her hands on his temples, her touch cold and electric. A surge of energy coursed through him, and suddenly, he was no longer on the Eclipse Voyager. He stood in a vast, swirling void, surrounded by shifting shapes of light and shadow. The whispers were louder here, a cacophony of voices that threatened to drown out his thoughts. You cannot resist, the voices intoned. You are us. We are you. Asher gritted his teeth, focusing on Seraya's presence beside him. Her form shone brightly in the void, a beacon of stability amidst the chaos. Together, they pushed back against the encroaching darkness, their combined wills forging a barrier against the Elandari's influence. But the voices grew louder, more insistent. Join us. Become eternal. For a brief moment, doubt crept into Asher's mind. What if they were right? What if unity with the Elandari could bring something greater than he could imagine? The barrier faltered, and the shadows surged forward. No. Saraya's voice rang out, cutting through the whispers like a blade. Stay with me, Ryan. Focus. Her words snapped him back to reality, and he channeled all his strength into the barrier. The shadows recoiled, their voices fading into a distant murmur. Slowly, the void began to dissolve, and the two of them were pulled back to the ship. Asher gasped for air, his body trembling from the ordeal. Seraya collapsed beside him, her glow faint but steady. It worked, she whispered. They're contained. For now. Asher slumped against the wall, his chest heaving. For now isn't good enough, he muttered. We need a permanent solution. Seraya nodded weakly. We will find one. Together. As the ship's systems flickered back to life, Asher couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The Elendari's presence was subdued, but their influence lingered, a constant reminder of the fragile alliance he had forged with Seraya. And as they continued their journey through the stars, one question haunted him. Had he saved humanity, or merely delayed its doom? A desperate gamble. The Eclipse Voyager drifted through the silent void, its systems flickering with residual energy from the Elendari containment. Captain Ryan Asher sat at the command console, exhaustion etched into his features. Across from him, Seraya leaned against the wall, her once luminous form dimmed. Despite their fragile victory, the tension between them was palpable. We can't keep this up, Asher said, breaking the silence. The containment won't hold forever. Sooner or later, they're going to break through. Seraya nodded, her gaze distant. I know. The Elendari essence is relentless. If we don't act soon, they'll consume everything, your ship, your mind, and eventually, your planet. The weight of her words pressed down on Asher. He had always prided himself on his ability to find solutions, to outmaneuver the impossible. But this? This felt like a losing battle. Do you have any idea how to stop them permanently? He asked, his voice sharp with frustration. Seraya hesitated, her iridescent skin flickering faintly. There is one way, she said slowly. But it's dangerous. And it requires your trust. Asher narrowed his eyes. You're not exactly batting 1,000 on trustworthiness right now. She sighed, her shoulders slumping. I deserve that. But I'm telling you the truth. My people created a failsafe, a device that can neutralize the essence permanently. It's hidden on a derelict station not far from here. If we can retrieve it, we can end this once and for all. A failsafe? Asher repeated, his skepticism clear. Why didn't you mention this earlier? Because it's not just a failsafe, she admitted, her voice heavy with guilt. It's a weapon. One that was never meant to be used. It won't just neutralize the essence, it will destroy it. And me along with it. The room fell silent as her words sank in. Asher studied her, searching for any sign of deception, but all he saw was resolve. You're willing to die to stop this? He asked, his tone softer now. If it means saving your world, yes, she said firmly. My people's mistakes have cost enough lives. I won't let them take yours. Asher leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He didn't trust Seraya completely, but he couldn't ignore the sincerity in her voice. And if she was telling the truth about the failsafe, it might be their only chance. Fine, he said at last. Tell me where this station is. The derelict station hung in the void like a ghost, its massive structure dark and lifeless. As the Eclipse Voyager approached, Asher couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. The station's design was alien but vaguely familiar, its spires and domes reminiscent of the Elendari architecture Seraya had described. This is it, she said quietly, her gaze fixed on the station. The last remnant of my people's empire. Asher brought the ship into dock, his fingers tightening around the controls. Vega, keep the ship ready for a quick departure. I don't want to stay here any longer than necessary. Understood, Captain, the AI replied. Asher grabbed his sidearm and turned to Seraya. Let's get this over with. The air inside the station was stale and cold, the corridors dimly lit by flickering emergency lights. Seraya led the way, her movements slow and deliberate. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint hum of the station's failing systems. This place gives me the creeps, Asher muttered, his voice echoing off the walls. It's been abandoned for centuries, Seraya said. But the failsafe should still be intact. Follow me. They descended deeper into the station, passing through massive halls adorned with alien symbols and murals. The images depicted the rise and fall of the Elandari, a civilization that had reached for the stars and paid the ultimate price. Finally, they reached a large chamber at the station's core. At its center stood a massive device, its surface etched with intricate patterns that seemed to glow faintly. Seraya approached it cautiously, her expression solemn. This is it, she said. The fail-safe. Asher stepped closer, studying the device. How does it work? Seraya placed a hand on the device, her fingers tracing the glowing patterns. It's powered by Elandari energy. I'll need to channel the essence into it and activate the core. Once it's fully charged, it will release a pulse that will neutralize the essence permanently. And what happens to you? Asher asked. She met his gaze, her eyes filled with sadness. The energy required will consume me. There's no other way. Asher clenched his fists, anger and frustration bubbling beneath the surface. He didn't want to lose her, not like this. But he knew she was right. The Elandari essence was a threat too great to ignore. Before he could respond, the whispers returned, louder and more aggressive than before. The air grew heavy, and the shadows in the chamber seemed to come alive. They're here, Seraya said, her voice tense. They won't let us destroy them without a fight. Asher drew his sidearm, his eyes scanning the room. Then let's make sure they lose. The chamber erupted into chaos as the shadows coalesced into forms, twisting, writhing shapes that defied logic. Asher fired at the creatures, his shots tearing through them but barely slowing them down. Seraya stood at the failsafe, her hands glowing as she channeled her energy into the device. Keep them off me, she shouted, her voice strained. Asher gritted his teeth, his focus narrowing to the battle at hand. The creatures swarmed around him, their movements erratic and unpredictable. He fought with everything he had, his determination fueled by the knowledge that humanity's survival depended on their success. Behind him, the failsafe began to glow brighter, its hum growing louder. Seraya's form flickered, her energy draining rapidly as she pushed herself to the limit. It's almost ready, she cried. Just a little longer. Asher fired another shot, his muscles aching from the relentless assault. You'd better hurry. The failsafe reached a blinding crescendo, its light filling the chamber. Seraya let out a cry of pain as the device activated, releasing a massive pulse of energy that swept through the station. The shadows dissolved instantly, their whispers silenced forever. When the light faded, Asher turned to Seraya. She was slumped against the device, her glow faint but still present. You're alive, he said, relief flooding his voice. Barely, she replied with a weak smile. The failsafe worked. They're gone. Asher helped her to her feet, his grip firm but gentle. Let's get out of here. As they made their way back to the Eclipse Voyager, Asher couldn't shake the feeling that their fight wasn't over. The Elandari essence was gone, but the scars it left behind would linger. And as humanity took its first steps into the wider galaxy, he knew one thing for certain. The universe was far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. Sacrifice among the stars. The Eclipse Voyager sped away from the derelict station, its engines humming steadily as Captain Ryan Asher piloted the ship through the void. Beside him, Seraya sat slumped in the co-pilot's seat, her form flickering faintly. The effects of the failsafe's activation had drained her, leaving her weak and vulnerable. Yet, there was a quiet strength in her eyes, a determination that hadn't wavered. "You all right?" Asher asked, glancing at her. "I'll survive," she replied, her voice soft but steady. "The Elendari essence is gone. Humanity is safe." For the first time since their ordeal began, Asher allowed himself a moment of relief. The station, the shadows, the whispers, all of it was behind them now. But as he looked at Seraya, the weight of her sacrifice pressed heavily on his mind. "You almost didn't make it," he said. "Why didn't you tell me how dangerous this was going to be?" "I didn't want you to stop me," she admitted, her gaze fixed on the stars. "This was my responsibility, Ryan. My people created the essence. It was only right that I be the one to end it." Asher leaned back in his chair, his frustration simmering just beneath the surface. "You could have told me. We could have come up with another plan, something that didn't involve you almost dying." Seraya turned to him, her expression gentle. "Would you have let me go through with it if I had?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. They both knew the truth. The silence between them was interrupted by Vega's calm voice. "Captain, the failsafe's energy pulse has disrupted the ship's quantum core. We're operating at reduced efficiency." "How reduced are we talking?" Asher asked, his grip tightening on the controls. "At our current rate, we'll need to make a stop for repairs before continuing to Earth," Vega replied. Asher sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Of course we do. All right, find us the nearest safe port." "There's a remote refueling station nearby," Vega said. "It appears to be operational, though records indicate it hasn't been used in decades." "Add that to the list of things I didn't want to hear today," Asher muttered. Set a course. The station came into view an hour later, its skeletal frame illuminated by the faint glow of nearby stars. Unlike the Elendari outpost, this facility was purely human, a relic of early interstellar exploration. Asher docked the ship carefully, his instincts on high alert. "Stay here," he told Seraya as he strapped on his sidearm. "I'll check it out." "I'm coming with you," she said, struggling to her feet. "You need to rest," he argued. "And you need backup," she countered, her tone leaving no room for debate. Asher sighed but didn't push further. Together, they stepped into the station, their footsteps echoing in the dimly lit corridors. The air was stale, and the walls were covered in layers of dust. It was clear no one had been here in years. "Vega, run a scan," Asher said, his voice cutting through the silence. "Scanning," the AI replied. "No life signs detected. The station's power systems are functional but operating at minimal capacity." They reached the main control room, where flickering monitors displayed outdated readouts. Asher began running diagnostics, while Seraya stood by the viewport, her gaze distant. "This place feels empty," she said softly. "That's because it is," Asher replied without looking up. "Most of these old stations were decommissioned when humanity moved to more advanced tech. Lucky for us, though, this one still works." As he spoke, the lights in the room flickered, and a low hum reverberated through the walls. Seraya stiffened, her iridescent skin shimmering faintly. "What was that?" Asher asked, his hand instinctively moving to his sidearm. Seraya closed her eyes, her expression tense. "It's nothing. Just residual energy from the failsafe. It's still lingering in me." "You sure?" Asher asked, his tone skeptical. She nodded, though her posture remained rigid. "I'm sure." Asher wasn't convinced, but he let it slide. They didn't have time for distractions. He focused on repairing the ship's core, his hands moving deftly across the controls. "I'll need about an hour to get everything sorted," he said. "You should rest." "I'll be fine," Seraya replied, though her voice betrayed her exhaustion. Asher turned to her, his gaze softening. "You've done enough, Seraya. Let me handle this." She hesitated but eventually nodded, stepping away to sit by the viewport. Asher returned to his work, the hum of the station filling the silence. An hour passed without incident, and the ship's systems began to stabilize. Asher let out a breath of relief as the final diagnostic completed. "We're good to go," he said, turning to Seraya. "Let's." He froze mid-sentence, his eyes widening. Seraya was slumped in her seat, her form flickering weakly. Her breathing was shallow, and her glow had dimmed to almost nothing. "Seraya." Asher rushed to her side, his heart pounding. "What's happening?" She opened her eyes weakly, her voice barely above a whisper. "The fail-safe took more from me than I thought. I don't have much time left." "No," Asher said firmly. "You're not dying on me. We'll figure this out." "There's nothing to figure out," she said, her tone resigned. "My body was never meant to contain that much energy. It's burning me out." Asher clenched his fists, his mind racing for a solution. He refused to accept that this was the end, not after everything they had been through. "There has to be a way to save you," he said. "Something we're not seeing." Seraya managed a faint smile. "You're a good man, Ryan. But some things can't be fixed." Asher shook his head, his determination hardening. "We'll see about that." Humanity's dawn. The Eclipse Voyager cruised through the void, its engines humming steadily as Captain Ryan Asher stared at Seraya slumped in the co-pilot seat. Her iridescent form flickered weakly, her glow fading with each passing moment. Asher's hands gripped the controls tightly, his mind racing for a solution, a way to save her. "Vega," he said, his voice edged with urgency, "analyze Seraya's condition. There has to be something we can do." The ship's AI responded after a brief pause. "Her energy levels are critically low, Captain. The failsafe drained her life force. Without a source of replenishment, she will not survive." Asher gritted his teeth, his frustration boiling over. "And what kind of replenishment are we talking about?" "Her physiology requires a specific type of energy," Vega explained. "It must resonate with her unique quantum signature. I can repurpose the ship's core to emit the required energy, but it will require shutting down all other systems, including life support." "How long would it take?" Asher asked. "Approximately 10 minutes, Vega replied. "However, the process will leave the ship vulnerable to external threats." Asher's jaw tightened. Shutting down life support meant putting himself at risk, but the thought of letting Seraya die after everything they'd endured wasn't an option he could stomach. "Do it," he said firmly. "Reroute the energy and start the process." "Understood, Captain," Vega said. Commencing core reconfiguration. The lights dimmed, and the hum of the ship's systems faded as Vega diverted all power to the core. The temperature in the cabin began to drop, and Asher could feel the air growing thinner. He glanced at Seraya, who remained still, her glow barely perceptible. "Come on, Seraya," he muttered. "You've made it this far. Don't quit on me now." Minutes passed like hours, the oppressive silence broken only by the faint hum of the reconfigured core. Asher's breathing grew labored, his vision swimming as the lack of oxygen began to take its toll. Still, he refused to leave Seraya's side, his hand gripping hers tightly. Finally, Vega's voice broke through the haze. "The process is complete. Energy levels have stabilized." Asher looked at Seraya, hope surging in his chest as her glow began to return. Her iridescent skin shimmered faintly, the light spreading across her form like a sunrise. Her eyes fluttered open, and she gazed at him with a mixture of relief and gratitude. "You did it," she whispered, her voice weak but steady. Asher managed a faint smile. "You're not getting rid of me that easily." As the ship's systems powered back on, Seraya's strength gradually returned. She sat upright, her glow brightening as the core's energy continued to replenish her. Asher leaned back in his chair, exhaustion washing over him. You risked your life for me, she said, her voice filled with wonder. That's what we do, he replied simply. Humans. We don't leave people behind. Seraya's expression softened, and for a moment, the weight of their journey seemed to lift. But as the silence settled, Asher couldn't help but voice the question that had been gnawing at him. What happens now? He asked. The Elendari essence is gone, but we've opened Pandora's box. The galaxy knows about us now. There's no going back. Seraya nodded, her gaze distant. Your world has stepped into a larger universe, one filled with dangers and possibilities you can't yet imagine. But you've proven something important, Ryan. Humanity has the strength, the ingenuity, and the heart to face whatever comes. She turned to him, her eyes shining with conviction. You've given me hope. And I believe your people will become something extraordinary. Asher studied her, his expression thoughtful. And what about you? What happens to you? I'll stay for as long as you'll have me, she said with a smile. There's so much I can teach your people, so much we can discover together. If you'll allow it, I'd like to help humanity find its place among the stars. He nodded slowly, a sense of purpose settling over him. Then let's do it. Together. As the Eclipse Voyager approached Earth, the blue and green orb growing larger in the viewport, Asher felt a surge of pride and determination. The journey had tested him in ways he hadn't expected, but it had also shown him the boundless potential of humanity. The Elendari essence was a reminder of the dangers lurking in the cosmos, but it was also a catalyst for growth. With Seraya's knowledge and humanity's resilience, the future was a blank canvas waiting to be painted. As the ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, Asher glanced at Seraya, who stood beside him, her glow steady and strong. Welcome to Earth, he said with a grin. You're going to love it here. She smiled, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. I'm looking forward to it. And as the ship touched down, Asher knew one thing for certain, this was just the beginning.